We are lesson 4, Journey of the Soul. For those who missed any lessons, I did send out an email with the recordings this week. If you didn't get it, just let me know, or if you'd like to review it. This is lesson 4, titled Where We Go. This is going to generally be discussing the ideas of heaven and hell in Jewish thought and Jewish belief. We are actually going to start with a video.
Birth and death are as contradictory as night and light. But they are strangely associated with an identical Hebrew word, kever. Kever means a tomb where a body is buried. But kever also means a womb where life is formed. A womb is a gateway to life, while a tomb is a gateway to afterlife. But is there an afterlife? Or does laying a body to rest in a grave mark the absolute end? If it were within our power to interview a soul, we would undoubtedly glean insight into afterlife. Instead, we have chosen to eavesdrop on a set of twins in their mother's womb to shed some light on the before life.
Hey, twin, I'm scared of birth.
Why?
It's the end of existence. We get ejected. We're finished.
I'm also anxious, twin, but I'm not scared. Birth is supposed to be a transition to the real life.
Huh. Don't give me the hiccups with your after-birth real-life fantasies. How can life be supported without an umbilical cord and amniotic fluid?
Well, maybe it's a radically different form of life. Maybe we won't need the cord.
I wish you were right. I keep kicking that thing away from my neck.
Stop spinning for a minute and imagine, twin. After birth, we will enter a ginormous universe filled with light and with air that we will breathe through our mouths.
Come on, grow some brain cells, will you? Mouths are not for breathing. Besides, if your postnatal paradise existed, why has no one ever returned from that realm? Forget it. Once we leave here, we collapse into cold, dry nothingness and wither into eternal gloom.
I don't think Mother would allow that to happen. She nurtures us in this cozy womb. She sends us nutrients for months on end. For what purpose? Just to end it all with birth? No. Mother has greater plans for us than that.
Now you're beginning to sound infantile. Do you see a mother lurking in some corner of the womb? Not a trace. Show me a mother. And as for your nutrients, can't you feel that annoying cord? Don't exchange empirical for fantastical.
Thankfully, these two delightful infants made it safely to the other side. They grew up in the universe that one had described and the other had denied. And until today, they continue their clamorous debate. It is only that the topic of contention has slightly shifted from, is there life after the womb, to, is there life after the tomb?
And the idea that, yes, we're born twice, once from the womb and once from the tomb, is very foreign for us, and we're not going to fully grasp it, just like a baby before birth is not going to fully grasp what life looks like after birth. Today, everything we're going to learn is going to be, we're going to be getting, whiffs of what's going on. But, we'll never be able to fully wrap our heads around it. But just to start, on page 128 in the student book, you'll see exercise 4.1. Just two questions. Number one is what I think I know about the Jewish view in the afterlife. And number two is what I would like to know about the Jewish view on the afterlife. Everyone should just, think to themselves or write it down what they feel their current view on afterlife is. And then we're going to just go around the room quickly. And when I say the word hell, what is the first word that pops into your mind? If we can start with Sheldon, what's the first thing you think of when I say hell? Fire. Michael?
I was thinking fire.
Fire.
Punishment.
Punishment. Punishment. Good. Devil. Okay. Fire. Satan. Darkness. Devil. Okay. So
Nothing positive.
nothing positive. So we're going to definitely come away from today with a very different view of hell. But the first thing we're going to do one more exercise. This one is fascinating. On page 130, 4.3, you're going to see the following things. What is happiness, a Hawaiian cruise, lifetime membership to an exclusive country club, lifetime of meaning, love, social status, wealth, and wisdom. And I want you to circle 1 through 10, 1 being the least pleasurable, 10 being the most pleasurable. What you feel, how pleasurable each one of these things are or would be. Take a second to, once you finish circling it, I want you to kind of see if you can take something away from, is there a general theme? If you analyze all your responses, is there a takeaway, a bigger takeaway that you can learn from what you feel your responses are? We're gonna don't tell me the answers. We're gonna get to it in a few moments, but I just want you to see in your heads if you can start to see where I'm going with this. No, that's not where I'm going. But and it's going to be interesting to see where our priorities truly lie. So, reward and punishment. It's one of there are, some of you may know, the Maimonides has a list of 13 Jewish principles, core Jewish principles. One of them happens to be reward and punishment, that God takes an active interest in what we do and gives out reward and punishment in accordance to what we do. And the Rambam Maimonides says this is a core Jewish belief. If we look at page 132, text 1a, it says, the 11th of the 13 principles of Jewish faith is that God, blessed be He, rewards those who observe the commandments of the Torah and punishes those who transgress its prohibitions. Now, we'll see in text 1b on page 133 that this primarily occurs after the soul leaves the body. It says, text 1b in Maimonides continues, the greatest reward is the pleasures of the world to come. The strongest punishment is to be cut off from the world to come. Now, the ultimate form of punishment or reward is spiritual, meaning punishment and reward come both in physical and spiritual forms, but the primary and the ultimate form of reward or punishment is spiritual and the world that the soul experiences in the quote-unquote hereafter. Why? Why is it that reward and punishment is generally pushed off till after what we know as physical life? Because if you look at your answers, the page 4 on exercise 4.3, you will see most likely that generally speaking, spiritual things like love, joy, and wisdom are a little bit more important to most of us than a cruise, country club, social status, or wealth.
And wealth.
Sorry?
And wealth.
And wealth, yeah. And this definitely evolves as we age and as we grow, gain more life experience. But at the end of the day, most of us will come to the realization in our own lives that spiritual things like love, joy, and wisdom generally are most important in our lives. Really about love and joy, happiness. So, God, in His infinite wisdom, understands that the greatest form of reward and punishment that can be given out is is in a spiritual sense. Before we go into the idea, just to finish on the slide. So before we go into the idea of reward and punishment, let's just address the elephant in the room. Many of us are uncomfortable with the entire concept of reward and punishment. Kind of seems belittling to God, who you would expect to transcend the pettiness of creation. It sounds almost belittling to God and us. Why can't we just be expected to do the right thing? Why can't we understand, that this is the right way to go? This is life, choose life or death, and this is life. Why does there need to be consequences, bribes, threats? So on a simple level, if there were no cops and there were no speeding tickets, would you speed? Of course you would speed. Many of us already speed. So that's a simple thing. Yes, altruism is beautiful and perfection is beautiful, but we're ultimately imperfect people and we have to contend with reality. On a deeper level, though, we have to understand the dynamics of reward and punishment. If you look at text 2, page 134, it says, "Do not consider punishments described in the Torah as comparable to penalties a person incurs for disobeying a decree of a mortal king. Not at all. Rather, they are completely natural consequences for one who fails to observe a Torah commandment and is denied the good and natural results from its observance. It's comparable to one who fails to sow his field and therefore cannot reap a harvest, or one who fails to wear clothes and is then cold. It is a natural consequence as the warmth provided by fire. It is as natural a consequence as the warmth provided by fire, the wetness of water, and the satiation of bread. In the same way, it's natural of each mitzvah. It's the nature of each mitzvah to provide the positive consequences that are promised for its observance, or the negative consequences that are stated regarding its transgression." Now, as an example, we all need food to survive. How do we get food? There's two possible ways. One way is to a businesswoman or a tailor or whatever it is, works for a living. He earns money and is compensated for his work. And with that money, he goes and purchases food. The formula is you work, money, and then food. Which is that the work and the food are not intrinsically connected. It's not automatic from work to money to food. It's somewhat arbitrary, the connection between each one of these stages. It's societal convention to reward work with money and also to provide food in exchange for money. But if you look at the scenario of a farmer who plows and sows his field and then reaps his produce, that's more of consequence. Consequence, it's a natural consequence that when you sow and then you reap, you get food. And what we saw in this text too is that reward and punishment for following God's commandments or violating them are not payment for what you're following, but they're just direct consequences of our actions, like the second scenario of sow, reap, food. For example, to say that what we're doing, what says in Torah, is reward and punishment, is like saying a doctor is going to reward your healthy lifestyle with good health and longevity, or that maybe he'll punish you with poor health for smoking and eating badly. There's really no reward or punishment in the conventional sense of Judaism. Our actions are simply have natural consequences. As you see in text 3, a reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. The retribution for a sin is a sin. The simple explanation of that is that God hooks you up with another mitzvah because you did one. So you did one, you got the reward for one. Because you did a mitzvah, God gets you another mitzvah. He helps you do another mitzvah, so you get another reward. But a deeper meaning is that the reward is built into the mitzvah. It's not a separate thing. The mitzvah itself and its natural consequences constitutes the reward, and vice versa. It's all built into one. Like you see sometimes, people will tell me, like Shabbos, people that start keeping Shabbos itself becomes the reward. It becomes something that they cannot live without. And there's many other examples in this, both positively and negatively. Sometimes the action itself turns into the reward or the punishment. And this applies as well to punishments afterlife. They're the natural consequences of our actions in this world. And if you think about it for a second, this tells us that mitzvahs are intrinsically important, hence the consequence. As opposed to viewing a mitzvah that's a way to be rewarded or punished. This shows on how a mitzvah itself has massive value and brings massive positive energy. There's intrinsic worth and importance to our actions. They're impactful on their own. Our labor, our work, our struggles are innately meaningful, and not merely because they garner us an external reward. And if you look at text 4, page 136, the fires of Gehenna, hell, are stoked in direct proportion to the degree to which the wicked fan their fiery passions. Accordingly, we must say that Gan Eden, paradise, is amplified by the tremendous passion that the righteous invest in their Torah study and the performance of God's commandments. They take great pleasure and delight in God Himself, and His deeds generate a corresponding abundance of light in Gan Eden. This gives us an amazing perspective on the afterlife, that it's not just an existing world that we enter after death, but it's a world that we create. It's not a reward or a punishment for our actions in the regular conventional sense, but it's a full experience in an unobstructed way of our actions themselves. And we'll see this in the visualization that we'll see in a moment. But just to summarize, on a simple level, reward and punishment are necessary, because without them, only the perfect would have an incentive to do good. But on a deeper level, the Torah's rewards and punishments in this world and the next are just naturally generated consequences of our actions. And the afterlife is the full and unobstructed experience of those actions.
Today's reflection meditation is going to help us begin to appreciate the massive influence that we have by performing one small deed here in this physical world while our souls are in bodies. There's somewhat of a paradox. On one hand, you see, we know that the physical world is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just one layer or level of reality, and that there is so much more to reality behind, in back of this veneer that we see, the physical world that we see. There are spiritual worlds behind spiritual worlds, behind spiritual worlds. And yet, at the same time, we know that what we do in this lowest world, in the physical world, has repercussions in the highest heavens. How do we wrap our minds around that paradox? That on one hand, we're in the lowest world, and on the other hand, we are affecting what goes on in spiritual realms. So the reflection that will help us with this is the visualization of a metaphor. Very simple metaphor. Imagine, if you will, a lever. What's a lever? A lever is basically two things. It's a stick and a wedge. You put the stick on the wedge, called the fulcrum, and you can lift things much bigger than you could without the lever. Now imagine you're lifting a big boulder, let's say. If you have a long enough lever, it's possible. Now when you are moving the long side of the stick, think about the fact that when you're moving that end just a little bit, it's causing massive fluctuations on the other end. That's like our world. On one hand, we're very far away from the fulcrum, but it's precisely because we're far away, then little movements on this end cause massive movements on the other end. Try to imagine yourself doing a mitzvah, a physical act, Something small in that it lasts for a moment. It takes place in one specific location. In that sense, it's small. And now imagine how that small movement is really moving the long side of the stick, the long side of the lever. Imagine how your small movement here in this world is causing massive movements in the heavens. We'll take a moment to visualize and to try to feel the leverage, the power that our small actions have.
We now turn our attention, to the topic of heaven and hell. So we'll start with hell. Judaism does in fact believe in a form of hell, but it is very radically different than the popular conception of it. This is why I'm going to use the word Gehenim, the Hebrew word for it, because it's very different than what many of us picture when we think of the word hell. Hell is generally thought of as this intense punishment for bad behavior with eternal damnation in the furnaces of hell, and it's a disturbing notion for many of us. Vengeful punishment is sometimes expected or common with the human condition from a human being. But we expect something a little bit different, maybe a little bit, more... a little bit, of a higher level from God. And it can make us uncomfortable, this whole idea. So, what is Gehenna, and how is it different than what we think of when we think of the word hell? The Jewish view is that Gehenna is the place where souls are rehabilitated. As we're going to see, the eventual destination of every soul is paradise, but to get there, most souls need a bit of a rehab stint. Why? Why do divine spiritual souls require a rehabilitation? Every one of our actions has an effect on our own selves. For example, charity. Typically we think of that the recipient is the one who's benefiting, and he is. But there's also a more subtle effect on the giver. Through giving charity to others, he becomes a better person. Every act of charity refines the person, making that person into a giver. And gradually it becomes so ingrained in that person's very personality till that person, the giver, becomes a completely transformed person. And unfortunately, on a negative side, with negative actions, the same is true. Negative actions can impact us and drag us down. Yes, the spiritual soul, the core of the soul, is still an actual piece of God, but our actions can either refine and further develop this core, or can conceal it. Most of us, unfortunately, are not perfect. We've made some mistakes. Our actions have somewhat distanced us from God, and our soul's capacity to experience the spiritual pleasures of paradise is diminished. We lack the faculties to experience paradise and enter it right away. So, enter the intermediate stage, which is Gehenna. The Talmud tells us actually a fascinating story about a person named Acher that can teach us about the role Gehenna plays in Jewish thought. Just as a background, Acher means other or somebody else. His original name was Elisha ben Avuya, but he was a great rabbi, a contemporary Rabbi Akiva in the 2nd century. But unfortunately, at some point, he went and he ultimately became a heretic a moral degenerate, a traitor who was actively aiding and abetting the Roman regime and their murderous ways. He truly became somebody else, which is why he's referred to as somebody else or other in the Talmud in many places. The Talmud transcribes his death and the events that followed in text 5 on page 138. Elisha ben Abuya was a former Mishnaic sage who turned into such a public heresy and treachery that he was derogatively named Acher, something else. When Acher died, the heavenly court declared, "We will not afflict him with the judgment in Gehenna, nor will we permit him to enter paradise." The reasoning: we will not afflict him with judgment because he studied much Torah, but we will not permit him to enter paradise because he sinned egregiously. Acher's former disciple, Rabbi Meir, said, "Better that he indeed be judged and punished, so that he may then enter paradise." So here we see Rabbi Meir, who says, further, if you look in the text, he says that when he dies, he's going to intercede in the heavenly court, that Acher should be admitted into Gehenna right away. Imagine, due to his great love and devotion to his teacher, Rabbi Meir prayed that his teacher Acher should go to hell. What's the meaning? What's the deeper meaning here? Gehenna, hell, in Jewish thought, is not the ultimate punishment. The ultimate punishment, if it would exist, would be not even getting to go to Gehenna. Gehenna is a cleansing process that enables the soul to fully experience paradise. In a way, it's a blessing. It's not a destination. It's a transitional phase on the road to the ultimate destination, which is paradise. And if you look in text 6, it says the purpose of Gehenna is to refine the soul, rid it of any sickness that it contracted. This is similar to the process of smelting silver, wherein the dross and the sediment is burnt away in the furnace, leaving the silver clean and free of impurities. Similarly, for the soul to be able to experience the light and supernal pleasures that bask in God's radiance, it must first be refined in the spiritual fire of Gehenna, whereby the negative is purged from the positive. So, a more appropriate name for Gehenna in English would be soul catharsis. Catharsis is a cleansing or a purge, and it's a much more accurate description of the role this experience fills in Jewish thought. Now, in text 7, we're going to see the nature of this painful experience. It's from Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan in the Aryeh Kaplan Reader from Masorah Publications from 1985, a more recent book, but it's a beautiful explanation from Rabbi Kaplan, who was a American rabbi and author, a physicist, who authored more than 50 volumes. Text 7, page 139. Then an individual will also see himself in a new light. Even in our mortal physical state, looking at oneself can sometimes be pleasing and other times be very painful. Imagine standing naked before God with your memory wide open, completely transparent, without any jamming mechanism or reducing valve to diminish its force. You'll remember everything you did. You will see it in the light of the unshaded spirit, or, if you will, in God's own light that shines from one end of the creation to the other. The memory of every good deed and mitzvah will be the sublimest of pleasures, but your memory also will be open to all the things of which you are ashamed. They cannot be rationalized away or dismissed. You will be facing yourself, fully aware of the consequences of all your deeds. We all know the terrible shame and humiliation experienced when one is caught in the act of doing something wrong. Imagine being caught by one's own memory with no place to escape. A number of our great teachers write that the fire of Gehenna is actually the burning shame one experiences because of one's sins. Of course, these concepts, as used by our sages, may also contain deeper mysteries and meanings, but a major ingredient in this fire may be shame. How else could one characterize the agony of unconcealed shame upon a soul? We are taught that the judgment of the wicked lasts 12 months. The pain eventually subsides. Human relationships serve as a useful analogy for these ideas. There are some people who, sadly, are incapable of experiencing an intimate relationship. Often this is because of maybe years of self-centered behavior and thought processes. And such people are not open to experiencing and truly relating to other people. And to change that, they got to really have an honest look in the mirror. The person's got to confront their past, truly understand and feel how destructive the path was. And it's a very painful process. But ultimately, it's healing and cathartic, and it allows a person to truly move on in a much better and a healthier way. Similarly, soul catharsis, which is Gehenna, is the soul experiencing the effects of its negative actions to the fullest intensity possible. In Gehenna, the soul finally sees the truth and also sees how its ego got in the way and prevented it from experiencing this truth in the world. And this is indeed very painful for the soul. But it's not a vengeful punishment. It's really a cleansing process for the damaged soul. The truth will never truly hurt somebody. The truth hurts in a healing way. And at the conclusion of this process, the soul gets rid of all the foreign baggage, and it's free to experience paradise in a full and beautiful way. And as we will see in text 8, Gehenna isn't eternal damnation or anything even close to that. In fact, the maximum amount of time you can spend in soul catharsis in Gehenna is 12 months, as we will see. There we go. Now,
Question over here.
yes. Yes. It's a good question. I can't tell you the exact process, but the soul has to go through a real heart-to-heart with God over 12 months, where it comes to, it sheds that baggage. However that's done, I don't know the exact process. Again, we can't fully wrap our minds around the idea of heaven and hell, but this is the closest we can get to it. The average, like I said, 12 months is for the worst of the worst. That's the maximum. The average person is far less. Far, far less. There are places in Kabbalah where it discusses the average person being maybe 3 to 4 months, or even less, 1 month. But interestingly, this is one of the reasons why we say Kaddish for a person for 11 months, because we don't want to say that anybody is there for 12 months. We don't want to, because we'll discuss in a minute how Kaddish helps the souls while they're in this transition period. We don't want to come out and say, yeah, my grandfather was there in Gehenna for 12 months. It's not something any of us want to.
So the maximum of the worst is 12 months.
Exactly.
Is the level of the heart-to-heart with God, since nobody's come back to tell us how wonderful the horrible was?
I don't know the exact level, but we will. We will discuss that heaven, the experience that a soul experiences in heaven, is different, slightly. Meaning, someone who is a great person kind of starts up here. Someone who is not as great kind of starts here. Everybody's on the same trajectory, but some people get a head start and some people don't.
But realistically,
Yeah.
isn't this sort of a man-made concept to make the people that lived beyond the person that died feel more comfortable with their being gone?
You're saying
The transition is really for us to accept the fact that they're gone.
You're saying what? You're saying the fact that I'm telling you that hell is not as fiery as.
Well, I mean, heaven and hell is a concept that is, in my opinion, is sort of an individual concept of what is good and what is evil. But all this stuff is sort of designed to take care of the living more so than the dead, so that we can accept
Well,
the dead is gone.
Well, you'll see at the end that we'll discuss at the end that there is actually studies that show people that are more spiritual and do believe in heaven grieve in a healthier way.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Look, I'm not going to tell you that this is. The fact is, like we said in lesson 1 at length, that this world is what matters most, and we're going to discuss that again momentarily.
Okay.
Yes,
Because
but
I was going to say, at one point in 2021, I felt like I was living in hell.
well, look, we all obviously that's experiences here on this. That's experiences here on this world. We're discussing heaven and hell in their.
There's also the sense of,
There's also good and bad here in this world. Of course there is, and there's good and bad experiences as well. And I mean, of course. That's for another lesson. So, text 8, we said the maximum sentence for the wicked is 12 months. The average person is obviously much less. Gehenna is a phase, it's not a destination. Every soul ultimately reaches its destination in paradise, as we see in text 9. That each, this is page 141.
For 1 second.
Yes.
So, from what we're going over right now, I think it's the concept where people say there is no hell in the Jewish religion.
Could be that's where it came
There's so
from.
many different-
Could be because we don't believe in the devil and the fire and the pitchforks.
You also leave Gehenna or whatever.
Yes, there's no eternal damnation.
Exactly.
Eternal.
There is no eternal
No,
damnation.
I'm saying, somebody said
12 months.
a couple lessons ago.
Everybody's got to do their time.
If it's only a cleansing, a purification,
Yeah.
that's certainly not a punishment. So we
It is uncomfortable.
Okay, but the point is we have heaven and purgatory. We don't have hell.
You can translate it however you want, but
Yeah. No,
that's why I'm using the word Gehenna and I'm not using hell or purgatory, because Gehenna is very unique. The Jewish view of it is very unique. It's very different.
And hell and heaven are Christian concepts.
Exactly. Yes, we're all influenced by popular culture and Christianity, and that influences the way we look at a lot of things. But if you go back to the original texts and the Kabbalah and the Zohar and the Mishnah and the Talmud, and even things that were passed down from Moses, this
So all of this is based on concepts that someone invented. I mean,
nobody
this
invented.
is based on, like why 12 months, why not 13 or 11?
We can do a whole nother course called, there is one actually called Judaism Decoded, which goes through how much of what we know was gleaned or learned. Everything we have is based on Torah sources. Either one of two things. Either it was passed down to 2 million people at Sinai. One of the things that makes Judaism unique as a religion is that, unlike pretty much every other religion, did not start with a revelation to one individual. It started with a revelation to 2 million people. Tough to keep a secret between 2 million people. And at Sinai, we know that it wasn't just the 5 books of Moses that were given. There was an entire oral Torah that was given together with the Torah. And for those who know, there are 13 ways that, or more, we say it every morning, about ways that we can learn from the Torah. There's things called Kal V'chomer, which is like, if this is, it's called how much more so. I don't know a way to there's rules for ways we learn from the Torah, where you'll have 2 verses that say the same thing, but one adds something, or 2 verses that contradict, but one adds something. And we'll see from these things, we will learn much of what we say here, and much of it is from the Zohar, which is handed down straight from Moses, and from the Jewish people at Sinai. A lot of these are mystical concepts. A lot of these are written straight in the Torah. Each source we bring is from somewhere else, but they're not modern inventions. This has been Jewish thought for thousands and thousands of years.
The question is because the idea of a month or 12
Well,
months.
there's a lot of
which is
numerology in
It's not something. It's very
12.
recent.
I mean, there are.
They had months in the Talmud. The Jewish calendar, which is a fascinating, in-depth, based on astrology. I mean, tough to understand for the greatest of rabbis. Even it's very scientific. It was written thousands of years ago, and you wouldn't expect it. I mean, This was written in the Mishnah. The Mishnah is thousands of years ago. All right, text 9. Every soul has its ultimate destination in paradise, as it says in text 9. This is from the Mishnah and Sanhedrin. Every member of the Jewish people, and like we discussed in lesson 1, it includes the righteous of the non-Jews as well, has a portion in the world to come, as it is stated. Your people are all righteous. You shall inherit the land forever. They are a branch of my planting, the work of my hands, in which I take pride. So every one of us, regardless of our level of piety or spirituality, has an eventual destination in paradise. The question is, what are we going to have to go through to get there? Are we going to have, a couple hours in Gehenna, or are we going to have 12 difficult months there? And just as an aside, important to note, you don't got to wait till Gehenna to hash these things out. There's something called teshuvah, which is repentance, or actually literally translated as return. We can all work on ourselves to be better people here in this world as well. We don't got to wait till 120 to figure that out.
I just have a missing piece in it. I understand the reconciliation process between the soul and God.
Yeah.
But the other part that obviously would never happen, which is if somebody did wrong, reconciling with the person they wronged with.
So that's a different conversation, but for sure in this world, you cannot be forgiven by God for something that you did to another person without that other person forgiving you as well. Though we do know also that you are not allowed to refuse forgiveness. You're not allowed to say, after someone asks you genuinely, you're not allowed to refuse. You're not allowed to refuse them. You do have to forgive them at some point. You got to give it. There's a whole thing. You got to give it a little bit of time. You got to ask 3 times, and at that point, it's on the person who was wronged to be able to let it go after a certain amount of time. But like we said, the soul lives on, and we're still able to have a relationship with the soul. Now, we just went through hell. Now let us go through the idea of paradise. We'll just give a quick summary of hell. Because Gehenna is a phase, it's not a destination. First of all, we're going to call it Gehenna. We're not going to call it hell. Second of all, it's not a destination. It is a phase. Every soul will ultimately reach its destination in paradise, regardless of a person's level of piety or religious observance. The maximum time a soul can spend in Gehenna is 12 months. Repentance or return, teshuvah, during one's lifetime also cleanses the soul of the self-harm caused by offenses. But also, as well, keep in mind that this world is the most important, and one moment of good deeds and goodness on this world is infinitely more pleasurable in an intrinsic way, as we will discuss momentarily, than the greatest pleasure of paradise. Now, what is paradise? Text 10, page 143. This is from the Abarbanel, who was actually a fascinating individual. We don't have time to go through his whole life story, but he was a great rabbi. He was also a statesman. He was from Portugal, who ended up being running to Spain. He was a counselor to royalty in Spain before the Inquisition. He tried to raise a large sum of money to avert the whole Inquisition decree. Didn't work out very well. He eventually ran to Italy, but fascinating figure in Jewish history. He wrote that spiritual reward is abstruse and difficult for mortal intellect to visualize and grasp as long as the intellect remains attached to the corporeal body. Just as one who is blind cannot grasp the concept of color, so the spirit that is engaged with corporeality cannot grasp purely spiritual matters. This is like what we discussed in the beginning. We're not going to be able to fully relate, but we're going to use kind of parables based on what we do know to help relate to these spiritual and esoteric ideas. Like we saw in the video of the twins in utero, that it's tough to fully imagine anything beyond, what's going on in your immediate vicinity. Now, although we can't give it true justice, here is how the Talmud describes the experience of paradise. Text 11. This is from the Talmud in Brachot, the first chapter, the first book of the Talmud. In the hereafter, page 144, there is no eating, drinking, procreation, commerce, jealousy, hatred, or competition. Rather, the righteous sit, their heads adorned with crowns, and they delight in the radiance of the divine presence. Now, let's talk about pleasure for a second. Like we saw in the beginning of the lesson, many different types of pleasure, but pleasure is always present in our lives, begins in infancy. As an infant, it might be, or a baby, it might be a lollipop, but then it moves on to, toy blocks, which are exchanged for, as you get older, are exchanged for fine wines and moving music and, abstract ideas, philosophy. We all have our own, path. But one of the most exquisite pleasures is relationships, the closeness to another person, an intimate relationship with a spouse, a parent, a sibling, a child, a close friend. You can take a second. There's that feeling. It's hard to say in words that's associated with that level of closeness with another person. A mitzvah, actually the Hebrew word mitzvah, comes from the word tzavsa v'chibur, which literally means connection. A mitzvah is a way to connect to God. A mitzvah forges a deep bond and a sort of intimate relationship with God. Now, down here on this world, that depth of that relationship is somewhat concealed by physicality and the physicality of our own existence. But when the soul departs the body and the physical world, it's finally able to fully experience the effects of its actions and the effect and its relationship with God that it built. Paradise is the experience of our relationship that we spent years building with God. When you do a mitzvah, you release a massive amount of, the Hebrew word is which literally translates as light or energy. Every mitzvah you do is of cosmic significance. It releases a massive amount of positive energy in the entire universe. And it builds a powerful, powerful bond and a connection with God that you only truly get to experience, because until then, it's kind of concealed by the physical reality that we see. You only really can touch and feel it and experience it deeply once you get to paradise. And this is the greatest possible pleasure. Just like we crave human relationships, the soul craves the unrestricted relationship with God, with its creator, which is what it finds in paradise, in Gan Eden, with the Garden of Eden, which is the Hebrew word for paradise. And human relationships that we have down here are just a taste of the beauty of Gan Eden, of Garden of Eden. So relationships are a little taste of heaven. Interestingly, like I mentioned for a second before, just to mention it quickly, is that studies show, if you see on figure 4.1, page 144, that people that believe in the idea of heaven and Gehenna and hell, can actually help them with, people that have faith in God, prayer, rituals, community, can be a real source of strength, and it also a belief that a soul, once it passes on, still lives and is in a quote-unquote better place, or on its way to a better place. And belief in an afterlife in these studies show to be a big help with bereavement. And generally speaking, many studies show that spiritual people are generally more optimistic. Now, just like no two people, like I mentioned a second ago, in short, just like no two people experience this world the same way, there are no two people experience paradise in the same way. Just like we said earlier, that the entry point to heaven is shaped by the soul's actions in this world.
Curious question.
Yes.
We're talking about souls and the levels that they attain as they go through all of this. When we go, how long do we have to take to meet up with our soulmate again?
It's a good question. Again, there's no time and space necessarily in heaven. So it doesn't look, again, it's tough to understand it. But generally speaking, the souls are all part of one larger body. There's one kind of, we're all a piece of God. So you kind of appreciate the real connection once you get to heaven. And it's not a matter of time or space, because we all are one. And it's going to be like the thumb finding the index finger.
Right.
It's not hard to find. Even if they might be in different places, they feel that connection all the time.
There's
All right. Now, in lesson 1, we went through how paradise is incredibly pleasurable, but it's not the most important. Meaning, we said paradise is the most pleasurable thing, but this world is the most important thing. Yes, there's tremendous deficiencies in this world, but the physical world is the major leagues, it's the big leagues, it's where it's at, it's where the action is. And in heaven, the souls reap the rewards of the things it did, the mitzvahs it did, but it can no longer do mitzvahs. When the soul rises level to level, they're all based on the action in this physical world. but it's not an active world. It's kind of like a plane on autopilot. There's no, the plane goes towards its ultimate destination, but none of the moves that it's making are independent. They're all kind of pre-programmed. It's not a, it's paradise is not an active world is the world. It is the word for it. In Kabbalah, it uses always, like, angels are called, humans are called walkers, kind of, or movers, and angels are called, like, stationary, because they can't do any action to increase their spirituality. As opposed to humans here on this world, we can do an action that immediately brings massive amounts of energy and spirituality into this world and lifts our own soul's level and lifts those around us. So similarly, a soul in paradise cannot on its own effectuate a aliyah, an elevation. But people here on this world can kind of make an override command on the autopilot of paradise and can do good deeds on their behalf. Especially children can do good deeds on their behalf, and it's kind of credited to their account. And the ability to perform mitzvahs, yes, is lacking in the afterlife, but our performance of them on their behalf can be credited to their account and help them elevate to higher forms of spiritual ecstasy. As we see in text 12, page 146, when individuals act righteously and are outstanding in the service of their Creator, they generate tremendous merit for the souls of their parents. This merit is simply by virtue of their parents having served as the instruments of their births. It is the parents who enable their soul to be born into this world, which in turn enables the many righteous deeds that they perform. The parents therefore have a share in their meritorious acts. However, anyone's charity or prayers on behalf of the departed person are beneficial for the soul of the deceased. It is therefore a Jewish custom to give charity and do other good deeds on behalf of the deceased in order to cause satisfaction to the soul. So we see the difference. There is a difference between this, descendants and other people. Good deeds done by the children of someone who passed don't need to be done specifically in the merit of the deceased in order to credit their account. Just by virtue of them being the descendants of the deceased, their ancestors are the link in the chain of humanity that leads to them, and their continued link to the world of action is these descendants, and the very fact of their leading virtuous lives is a credit to their forebears. And this, leading virtuous lives, is part of the children's mitzvah to honor their parents. In this world, we're obligated to take care of our parents' physical needs, and in the next world, we need to take care of their spiritual needs. Their soul's needs, meaning the spiritual needs we have to take care of in this world as well, but the soul has specific needs that we have to take care of once they move on to the next world. Other members are also able to credit, quote-unquote, the account of the deceased, the spiritual account, but it needs to be a meditated action, needs to be specifically in their honor. Now, the most crucial time to engage in these actions and elevate the soul of the deceased is during the 12 months following their passing. As we explained last week, that this is the time when their connection to the physical world is at its strongest point. These 12 months are also the maximum period of time that a soul might spend in Gehenna, so it's especially important to sort of augment the soul's credit balance at this time. The yahrzeit is also an auspicious time because they're already ascending to a higher level. You can push them even higher. And also the Yizkor service, which is said on Yom Kippur, Shmini Atzeres, Pesach, and Shavuot. And the heart of Yizkor is the pledge made to charity on behalf of the deceased soul, as a merit that serves to elevate their souls on that day. Now we're going to talk about Kaddish, now we're going to talk about mitzvahs that benefit the souls of the departed. The partial list of mitzvahs that are mentioned throughout Jewish literature that can be done to benefit the souls of the departed: donating to charity, especially in the first year after passing. You can donate daily, even if only a small amount, because it'll help them move. It'll bring merit to them every single day. Particularly opportune times to give charities before praying and before lighting the Shabbat candles. Attend Yizkor services and pledge to give charity in memory of the deceased. Study Torah. Provide financial support to Torah students, meaning if you are not studying on your own, you still get the merit of studying Torah. If you help those who study Torah, you can sponsor a Torah class, the same idea. Donate books to Torah, Jewish practices, synagogue or library. write a Torah scroll in the deceased's honor, or you can donate a Torah scroll, or help write a Torah scroll, or write a letter in a Torah, because that whole Torah becomes in their honor. Any mitzvah, generally speaking, is very beneficial for the soul of the departed. Figure 4.3 on page 148, you see customs for a yahrzeit, which help the soul on the day of the yahrzeit, which is to light a 24-hour candle, recite the Kaddish during that day, visit the grave, recite chapters of Psalms, donate to charity, study Torah, especially the Mishnah, which is directly correlated to the soul. You can receive an aliyah to the Torah, a blessing by the Torah, sponsor a kiddush for your congregation. The blessings recited on the food are of merit to the soul, or convene a gathering of relatives and friends to commemorate the deceased and discuss what we can learn from the deceased's good deeds. As we mentioned earlier in a previous lesson, that when you speak about good things that the deceased does, God is kind of like, hey, this guy wasn't too bad after all. And that the angels start, pleading the person's case before God and saying, look at all these amazing things and look at the effect that this person had on people in this world and the amazing good that they did. Now, Kaddish. We'll finish off with the idea of Kaddish. What is its significance? Why it is said? It's the...
Quick question.
Yes.
So we're talking about doing mitzvahs to elevate them.
Yes.
Is the reverse true? I mean,
It's a good question.
If you end up doing bad deeds, does that keep them from being elevated? Or
It's a good question. I'm not entirely... I have never seen that said anywhere. I've never seen that mentioned. It's a good question. I can look into that. Never seen that. I've never seen that specifically mentioned.
Yeah, one way but not the other.
Yeah, really good job.
It's a good question. Let me just help Sheldon. All right, so we're going to get into Kaddish. Any other questions on what we just said? All right, Kaddish. This is generally the most well-known mourning custom of Judaism. This is already into popular culture. Everybody knows about Kaddish. We're going to read the text of Kaddish in a second. And if you read the text, it's a little bit interesting as why it's not what you would expect. It does not say a word about death, the soul, or anything like that. It's nothing that you would imagine. But as we will explain, it does wonders for the soul. And it causes the soul to elevate to higher and higher levels in Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. We'll just go through the text quickly in English. Text 13. Exalted and hallowed be his great name. The congregation says Amen. Throughout the world which he has created and according to his will. May he establish his kingship, bring forth his redemption, and hasten the coming of his Messiah. In your lifetime and in your days and in the lifetime of the entire house of Israel, speedily and soon, and say Amen. May his great name be blessed forever and to all eternity. Blessed and praised, glorified, exalted, and extolled, honored, adored, and lauded be the name of the Holy One. Blessed be he. Beyond all the blessings, hymns, praises, consolations that are uttered in this world, and say Amen. May there be abundant peace from heaven and good life for us all, for us and for all Israel. Say Amen. He who makes peace in the heavens, may he make peace for us and for all Israel, and say Amen. So, if you look at the words, it's basically us talking about how great God is and exalting God, praising God. Let me ask you, why are we saying that? I mean, beautiful to say. What? Okay. Good answer. We'll see in text 14. This is from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, Adin Even Yisrael, who was actually just passed away about 2 years ago. Was a tremendous philosopher, author. He actually was one of the first people to translate the Talmud. He wrote many, many books, some of which we have here. When he passed away, everyone from Time Magazine, the New York Times, they all wrote about him. He was a tremendous, tremendous scholar and writer. And so he writes based on Kabbalah, the significance of the Kaddish in text 14. Every member of the community of Israel is, in a sense, among those who establish and proclaim God's sovereignty in this world. As the verse states, you, Israel, are my witnesses, God declares. Therefore, the absence of any individual creates a void, as it were, in God's sovereignty in the world. In order to fill this void, Others need to intensify their work and to proclaim on their own behalf, as well as on behalf of the deceased, exalted and hallowed be his great name. With this perspective, we can understand why reciting the Kaddish elevates the soul of the deceased. The aggregate of a person's actions and accomplishments in this world define his or her life. However, the tally of a person's achievements does not necessarily conclude at the moment of death. A complete evaluation of a person's accomplishments must also include all that is accomplished as a result of the person's inspiration and actions. Therefore, when those who remain alive, and especially the person's children and descendants whose very existence is a credit to their forebears, do good deeds, they contribute to the deceased's balance of accomplishments. For although the deceased is no longer active in this world, his or her actions continue to inspire positive deed and action. This is why the recitation of the Kaddish elevates the soul, because God being exalted in this world as a result of and in the name of the deceased. So I guess that explains it, but it's that person is no longer here to bring good to the world in the name of God. So when we get up there and praise God in this person's name, we're filling the void that he left, and we're enabling the soul to continue his elevation by kind of doing what if he was here, or if that person was here, by doing what they should have been doing in this world if they were still here. We allow them to elevate in the next world.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Is that why large families are encouraged? Because there's that many more people sitting.
That's a good question. I never thought of it that way, but it's not. That's not. I guess it's a fringe benefit of having a large family, that you have many people to take credit for the good they do in this world.
Also saying Kaddish, and you're also sort of saying, why did this happen to him? We're praising you, you're great. Why did you let this happen?
That's an interesting. You've heard that before?
Well, I mean, that's how I felt at times. I mean, I've been saying Kaddish since I was 21.
Wow.
It's not that God let it happen. He obtained it on Yom Kippur when he signs the Book of Life.
Yeah, I disagree with his decision.
Look. That's a why do bad things happen to good people? That's a famous question. That's for many more than just one lesson. We can go into it. But generally speaking, this is the understanding of Kaddish, that there is a massive void in this world of spiritual action and good, and which is all technically praise to God, that person left the void here. And what do we try and do?
Fill the void.
We have to fill that void.
Okay, but when you're very young, you're not explaining. It's a rote learning. To be honest.
I'm not here to explain. That's a question I cannot answer.
Just curious.
You're free to question God. You're encouraged to question God. Generally speaking, faith is us protesting God, saying that the world, we want to make the world a better. We're protesting that the world should be better. We're protesting for a world that ought to be, not that is. And I mean, I believe that was Jonathan Sachs, former chief rabbi of England, who used to say that. But
God's response to that is, I made you to make this world better. It's not up to me
yes,
to make the world better. It's up to you to make the world better. Fair enough. The world is imperfect, and if the world was perfect, it's exactly. Though that doesn't explain any. I can't explain to you the horrors that we sometimes see. I cannot explain to you why a young rabbi in Dubai was taken from us last week. You're free to question. You should question, and you should protest. I don't have all the answers. But what I can say is, what we can do is, we can say Kaddish, and we can say that we want the world to be better, and we can say that we want to bring more spirituality and more good into this world in that person's name, and let them not be forgotten, and let them still have an impact on this world through us, that now that they no longer have the hands and feet in a physical way to do action in this world, it's our job. Kaddish is not just Kaddish. Kaddish is telling us that the idea is that person no longer has physical hands and feet in this world. And what do we have to do? We have to fill their void. And when we do that, not only we're benefiting the world and bringing peace to the world in a physical way, but we're also benefiting the person who is now in paradise. And we help them climb to higher levels. Plus, we help ourselves.
Like we said, the more good we do, the more we transform ourselves. It should be noted, though, that, after talking about how great paradise is, like we said, this world is infinitely more important. The Rebbe used to talk about the coming of the Mashiach, which is a whole other topic, about a time of peace and prosperity for the whole world. And the Rebbe used to mention that it's not just for the people who are physically in this world, but it's possible that the people in Gan Eden even need it more than us, because they're dying to come back to the physical world. Yes, they're enjoying it; it's tremendously pleasurable, but they're all dying to get back in the game. Another amazing thing is, it says that when a person gets to heaven, or when the Mashiach comes and everything is great and the world is full of good, we're going to long for the days where we could have made real positive change on our own. And we're going to say, should have done more. Should have done more, because you're going to miss it. You're going to miss it. As crazy and as difficult as the world is, when a game becomes too easy, it's no longer fun.
A society that isn't growing decays.
100%. One of my teachers used to say that you got to look at life as an escalator going down, and if you're not running up, you're going down. So, to summarize the Kaddish idea, Kaddish is a proclamation of God's greatness. Its recital is something that brings merit to this and lifts the soul of the deceased out of Gehenna into higher levels of Gan Eden. Every Jew is responsible for establishing and proclaiming God's sovereignty in this world. Every person is responsible for that. The absence that a person creates when they leave this world is a void that needs to be filled by others who proclaim on behalf of themselves, as well as the person who's deceased, exalted and hallowed be his great name. Imagine for a second a medical researcher spends all his time in a lab trying to find a cure for cancer, and finally he discovers it. Cancer is removed from the face of the earth. The Nobel Prize Committee hears about the discovery. They confirm the discovery. They invite him to come to Sweden with his family and friends to receive the award, a big ceremony. It's perfectly natural that he's awarded this prize. He's the most deserving. And yet, for the researcher, receiving the award is somewhat anticlimactic. Because what prize or ceremony could ever compare to the excitement of being involved in the work itself? The thrill of the moment when he realized that he single-handedly managed to save all humankind from this horrific disease. Dr. Salk from the polio vaccine is not remembered for the prizes he received. He's remembered for the cure, for curing polio. And after the experience of doing something that's that important, basking in the memory of the accomplishment feels good, but far more significant is the quality of being able to engage in the work itself. Being focused on the prize is like a doctor focusing on the Nobel Prize and not on the fact that he just saved a life or saved the world from polio or a major disease. Yes, we've discussed the afterlife and the rewards. But we here serve in this world as divine operatives that are engaged in a task so profound that the reward simply pales in comparison. We must never forget. It's all about what we do here and now. The spiritual afterlife and its experiences, yes, are beautiful, but they're not the ultimate form and plane of existence. This physical world is the purpose of everything, the purpose of all creation. It's infinitely more meaningful. Right here you can find it all. If you look in text 15, it says the primary reward in the hereafter is the soul returning to its source and uniting with God. Certainly, however, it is far greater when the soul connects with God here in this world, for that is the purpose of creation, through studying Torah and performance of mitzvahs. You see in text 16 on page 154, when our master and teacher, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, would enter a state of spiritual ecstasy, he would be heard exclaiming, "I want nothing at all. I don't want your paradise. I don't want your world to come. I want nothing but you alone. Never lose your focus on this world. If you look at the book called Shir HaShirim, that's considered the Holy of Holies, this book, in comparison to all the other 23 books of the Torah. What is special about this Shir HaShirim, this book? It's a poem that King Solomon wrote about the relationship between God and his people. Compared us to a bride and groom, God and the people. The Mishnah tells us that Rabbi Akiva said the entire world was never as perfect as the day when Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, this book was given to Israel. For all the scriptures are holy, but Shir HaShirim is the holy of holies. In marriage, yes, the husband and wife seek to personally benefit from the relationship, but the relationship truly matures when it becomes, I want nothing but you. When the goal is the relationship itself, and not any of the fringe benefits, that's the essence of a proper relationship. You know, Rabbi Manis Friedman, a famous relationship expert, says, someone once came to him and complained, for 25 years I've been married, what did I gain? What do I have to show for it? Rabbi Manis Friedman says, he laughed and he said, benefit. What better thing do you want from life than 25 years of committed marriage? In Judaism as well, the holiest of holy is to have that type of loving relationship with God. We might not see it with our physical eyes or sense it with our physical senses, but the deepest connection and intimacy with God can be experienced right here, right now, in the course of our everyday lives. One mitzvah, one positive good deed, one smile, one shining light, one positive, good or kind moment at a time. You know, there's a story, quick I'll say, a well-known story of a man who came to his Rebbe and said, Rebbe, I want to see Elijah. I want to see Elijah. How can I merit to see Elijah the prophet? And his Rebbe said, if you go to the outskirts of town, right before it's coming up Rosh Hashanah, go right before Rosh Hashanah to the outskirts of town, far away. Take a wagon filled with clothes and food and wine. You're going to find a little house there. Go to that house. Bring everything with you. Experience Rosh Hashanah there. And you'll see Elijah. He runs. He spends thousands of ruble on this tremendous wagon filled with beautiful goodies and presents and food and clothes. Comes running up to this little dilapidated, blown up house. And as he's walking to the door, he hears kids crying to their mother, saying that since their father passed away, they have no food, they have nothing. They can't afford food or wine or anything for the holiday. They have no clothes. So this man comes and he brings everything in and they celebrate and have a beautiful holiday. He comes back and he says, I didn't see Elijah. I didn't merit to see Elijah. What did I do wrong? So his teacher, the Rebbe, says, one more time, fill up a big wagon, even bigger and beautiful. It's coming Pesach soon. Go for Pesach, for Passover. Bring up beautiful with matzah and meat and wine and clothes, presents. Go back to this house. Comes back to the house, and as he's coming to the door, he hears the children crying. What are we going to do? We have no food. Mama, what are we going to do? And the mother turns to the children, and he hears the mother say, let us pray that just like last time, Elijah will come and save the holiday for us. We have to understand we have the power within us to do amazing, tremendous things. We have a little bit of Elijah within each of us. We are put in this world because God decided the world cannot exist without us. So let us not forget the tremendous, tremendous power. Yes, heaven and paradise and all beautiful, beautiful, beautiful things. But let's utilize every minute, every second we have down here to make the greatest impact we can on ourselves, on our friends, on our families, on our communities, and ultimately on the entire world. If we look at exercise 4.4 on page 154, record one point from today's lesson that resonated with you most and identify a good deed that you can do in memory of a deceased loved one. Next week we're going to talk about reincarnation. Yes, there's heaven and hell, but there's also an idea in Judaism of reincarnation where the soul comes back to this world We'll explore this highly mystical and surprisingly
Lesson
relevant
4.
subject.
Where
Now
we
let's go
go.
on to the key points of
1. God's rewards and punishments are natural consequences of our actions. 2. When we do mitzvot, we forge an intimate relationship with God. In the afterlife, our souls experience the effects of our actions, our relationship with God. This is the greatest possible pleasure, and is also known as paradise, Gan Eden. 3. At times, a soul cannot enter paradise immediately, for its inappropriate actions in this world diminished its capacity to experience spiritual pleasures. Gehinnom, a painful yet cleansing process, is temporary. Every soul ultimately reaches paradise. 4. In Gan Eden, the soul constantly ascends to higher levels. Good deeds performed in a person's memory, including the recital of Kaddish, elevate the soul to higher levels that it cannot attain on its own. 5. What we do here and now is more important than the pleasures or pain of the afterlife. Living in order to receive rewards in the next world, or to avoid heavenly punishment, distracts our focus from where it belongs, increasing goodness and godliness in this world